Hello and welcome to English Spark Official. I'm Zayden, joined as always by Alara.
Hey everyone! We're so excited about today's topic.
So usually when we talk about acquiring a completely new skill, right, whether that's coding a new piece of software or learning a complex math theorem or even mastering a brand new language,
Right.
there's this massive expectation of rigid structure. We always kind of treat it like we're building a brick wall, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
You lay down the grammar rules as your foundation, then you stack the vocabulary on top like bricks. You memorize the formulas for the mortar, and, well, eventually the wall is built.
Yeah, it's very methodical.
Exactly. It's visible, it's safe, it's predictable.
I want to welcome you, the learner, to today's deep dive, because today we are tearing that wall down. We're looking at a completely different way to learn.
And I think it's important to point out that the brick wall analogy you just used, it describes a very Newtonian view of learning.
A Newtonian view.
Yeah, like a system where input equals a highly predictable output. The assumption is basically that if you just memorize 3,000 vocabulary words and perfectly comprehend the rules of past perfect tense, you will naturally be able to communicate. Right, like a math equation.
Exactly. It's the spreadsheet approach to human interaction.
But then, you step into the actual real world. You step into the world of native speakers.
Yeah.
Rapid fire dialogue, slurred words, coffee shop background noise, cultural nuances.
They're messy stuff.
All the messy stuff. And suddenly that perfectly constructed brick wall just completely crumbles. I mean, the spreadsheet is totally useless when the person you're talking to doesn't use the textbook phrasing.
No, they never do.
Right. So we are looking at a learning landscape that is incredibly messy and fluid.
Because human communication is the absolute definition of a chaotic, dynamic system.
Yeah.
You really cannot spreadsheet your way into a natural rhythm.
Yeah, it just doesn't work.
The variables are changing like millisecond by millisecond based on emotion or urgency or context.
Which is exactly the conflict at the heart of today's source material. So we are examining a curriculum framework. It's essentially a master architectural blueprint for educators coming from a channel called English Spark Official. And this curriculum is titled Master English Rhythm, Fixing Your Indonesian Accent Fast.
What's fascinating here is that the architects behind English Spark, they aren't just providing a list of vocabulary words for their students to memorize.
No, not at all.
They have engineered this highly specific, basically non-negotiable set of rules for how information must be delivered by their hosts.
Yeah, it's super strict behind the scenes.
It really is. And they are attempting to solve the precise problem you just mentioned, bridging that massive gap between theoretical textbook knowledge and real-world chaotic execution.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission today is to reverse engineer this entire framework. The mandate here is honestly kind of radical.
It goes against almost everything traditional education teaches us.
Exactly. The creators of this curriculum explicitly ban their own educators from using academic jargon. They completely outlaw traditional robotic textbook phrasing.
No B2 or C1 vocabulary when explaining things.
Right. And they even demand that the educational structure itself be entirely hidden from the learner. And they claim this is the ultimate shortcut for intermediate learners to achieve natural fluency.
Specifically targeting that 20 to 30-year-old demographic in the A2 to B2 proficiency range.
Right. So let's talk about the very first rule in their documentation, because it's a mandate to completely erase the, quote, robotic textbook.
Yeah, they demand a modern, friendly tone utilizing balanced, active dialogue.
They are essentially forcing the learning environment to simulate the target environment, which makes total sense.
It does. Let's define that target environment, especially for that A2 to B2 plateau.
Yeah, because that plateau is brutal.
It really is. When we say A2, for you listening, we're talking about someone who has survived the absolute beginner phase. They know the basic verb.
All right, they can successfully order a coffee.
Exactly, or navigate a train station. But they are trying to push into B2, which is where you actually hold a spontaneous, flowing conversation without sweating through your shirt.
Without running a massive diagnostic check in your head before every sentence.
Right, and the gap between A2 and B2 is where most adult language learners spend years. And honestly, it's often where they completely abandon the pursuit.
Because it just gets too frustrating.
Because the failure point isn't a lack of vocabulary. The failure point is that they have relied heavily on two-dimensional text to understand a three-dimensional medium.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
When a learner relies on textbooks, they master the written mechanics, sure, but they completely fail to acquire the actual music of the language.
So is textbook learning essentially like reading sheet music versus actually getting on the dance floor and feeling the beat?
That is the perfect analogy.
Because, I mean, you can study the notes on the page all day long, right? You can know exactly where your feet are mathematically supposed to go.
Step 1, step 2.
Yeah, but if you never actually hear the music playing and you just step onto the dance floor, you are going to be performing this awkward mechanical math equation while everyone else around you is just naturally swaying.
And that mechanical math equation is exactly what produces the robotic staccato delivery the English Spark framework is trying so hard to eradicate.
It's why people sound like robots when they read from a script.
Exactly. The written word cannot model rhythm. Think about it. A textbook gives every single word on the page the exact same visual weight.
Right, physically on the paper.
Yeah. The word thy takes up the same physical line space and importance to the eye as the word danger.
Wow, yeah, I never thought about it like that.
But in spoken human interaction, rhythm is the primary vehicle for meaning.
And this curriculum is obsessively targeting a very specific rhythmic gap, the gap between Indonesian and English.
Yes.
If we are throwing out the textbook to fix an accent fast, we have to understand what the actual physical and phonetic problem is here.
We really have to look at how time is distributed by the speaker.
Time distribution.
Yeah, so Indonesian is what linguists categorize as a syllable-timed language,
Okay.
but rhythm is governed by the syllables themselves.
Okay, so what does that actually sound like?
It means every single syllable gets roughly the exact same amount of time, emphasis, and physical jaw movement. Da-da-da-da-da-da.
Like a metronome.
It functions very much like a metronome, yes.
So an Indonesian speaker's mouth has been trained for decades to give equal respect to every single phonetic sound.
Precisely. It's deeply ingrained muscle memory. But English operates on an entirely different phonetic engine.
Right, English is a stress-timed language.
Exactly. The rhythm is not dictated by the number of syllables. It is dictated by the stressed words, the nouns, the main verbs, the adjectives.
The actual important information.
Yes. And the time between those stressed words is roughly equal. So to maintain that beat, an English speaker has to actively compress, swallow, and squish all the unimportant structural words in between.
So it's definitely not a metronome.
No, it is Morse code. Da-da-da-da-da.
Okay, so the textbook is actively harming the Indonesian learner because it reinforces their native instinct.
Yes, it tricks them.
If they read the sentence, I am going to the store, from a page, their syllable-timed brain looks at the paper and says, okay, every word here is important. I must articulate every letter.
And so they say, I am going to the store.
Right. They are achieving 100% spelling accuracy.
But they sound like a glitching teleprompter.
Yeah, and to a native English ear, that equal weighting actually destroys comprehension, doesn't it?
Totally. A native speaker expects the Morse code rhythm. They expect to hear, I'm going to the store.
Right. The words are reduced to this tiny fraction of a second. Go in.
The native ear uses that rhythmic compression to quickly identify what the sentence is actually about. So when the Indonesian speaker gives to and the full articulation, the English listener's brain actually gets confused about what the focal point of the sentence is.
Because everything sounds like the focal point.
Exactly.
So the framework forbids traditional schooling methods because traditional schooling rewards the math equation approach.
Yes. And if you test an A2 learner constantly on grammar and spelling, you train them to run a massive diagnostic check in their brain before they even open their mouths.
They are overthinking every syllable instead of feeling the bass drop.
Which fundamentally paralyzes the learner. Human conversation does not allow time for diagnostic checks.
It's too fast.
Way too fast.
Yeah.
That's why the English Spark architects require their educators to include natural interruptions, reactions, agreements, ums, and ahs within the audio script itself.
Oh, they actually script the messiness.
Yes. They are building a simulated jungle.
I love that. A simulated jungle.
If you want to train someone to survive in the wild, you do not put them in a sterile laboratory with a list of animal names. You put them in an environment that behaves unpredictably.
But wait, if we are completely ditching textbooks and we are simulating the messy, chaotic jungle of a coffee shop chat,
Right.
how on earth do you teach something mathematically complex, like contrastive stress, to someone who barely understands past perfect verbs?
That is the big question.
Because you can't just stop a casual chat with a friend to read a phonetic dictionary definition. The whole conversational illusion would just shatter immediately.
This is the central puzzle the framework solves.
Yeah.
And they solve it through the art of conversational scaffolding.
Scaffolding, like building support around the learner.
Exactly. The curriculum explicitly requires starting with simple A2 level vocabulary and gradually increasing the difficulty.
Okay.
But the major guardrail here is that any complex grammar rule or difficult phonetic concept must be explained naturally within the context of the dialogue.
So no breaking the fourth wall to give a lecture.
The educators are strictly forbidden from using B2 or C1 academic jargon.
So absolutely no dropping the phrase stress-timed language on an intermediate learner.
If you use the phrase stress-timed language or phonetic compression with an A2 learner, you haven't just confused them, you have actively triggered their affective filter.
The affective filter. I want to dig into the biology of that for a second, because it sounds like a crucial mechanism for anyone trying to learn anything. We are talking about the physical brain literally blocking out information, right?
Yes, it is a foundational concept in second language acquisition, popularized by the linguist Stephen Krashen.
Okay, so what exactly triggers it?
When a learner is subjected to academic jargon they don't understand, or when they feel the anxiety of being tested, their cortisol levels spike.
Stress hormone.
Exactly. And the amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, activates.
It thinks it's in danger.
From an evolutionary standpoint, when you are stressed, your brain diverts resources away from high-level cognitive processing, like language acquisition, and pushes all that energy towards survival mechanisms.
The brain literally says, we don't have time to learn rhythm right now. We are under attack by a grammar quiz.
That is physiologically what is happening. The affective filter physically prevents comprehensible input from reaching the language acquisition centers of the brain.
That is insane.
The learner can literally hear the words you are saying, but the neurological pathway to actually absorb and store that information is shut down by stress.
So the mandate to use everyday examples, and the source specifically lists things like daily life, relatable situations, and practical usage.
Right.
That isn't just about being friendly or relatable. It is a biological hack to keep cortisol levels low.
By anchoring a difficult linguistic concept in a highly familiar daily routine, like commuting or office small talk, the cognitive load plummets. The learner's brain feels safe.
Okay, let's walk through how that scaffolding actually functions in real time, because the curriculum demands we teach rhythm and stress without using those specific academic words.
Let's use the mandated example of a morning routine. Making coffee.
Perfect. It's universally relatable for a 20 to 30-year-old worker.
So instead of a teacher standing at a whiteboard saying, today we will study contrastive stress and intonation patterns to highlight pronoun importance.
Which instantly spikes cortisol.
Right. Instead of that, the English Spark framework has the hosts act out a scenario using A2 vocabulary.
Okay, so how does that sound?
One host says, I am so tired. I really need my coffee.
And the other host playfully snaps back, you need your coffee. What about me? I was up all night working.
Notice what just happened there.
The vocabulary is incredibly simple. Tired, need, coffee.
But the host just executed a highly advanced phonetic maneuver.
The emphasis shifted.
Exactly. First, it was on the verb need. I really need my coffee. Then it aggressively shifted to the pronoun your. You need your coffee.
And the hosts would just stay in character. They wouldn't break the fourth wall to give a lecture on what just happened.
No, one host might just naturally say, whoa, notice how your voice just went way up when you said your? It completely changes the vibe.
That is brilliant. They are teaching the listener that English uses pitch and volume to indicate contrast and conflict.
Yes.
And they are teaching a C1 level rhythm concept entirely through the context of fighting over who gets the first cup from the coffee machine.
It's totally seamless.
It is essentially the educational equivalent of physical therapy in a virtual reality game.
Oh, I like that comparison.
Yeah, a few years ago, hospitals started using a VR game called Snow World for burn victims during their wound cleaning sessions.
I read about this, yeah.
The physical pain of the therapy is agonizing. But because the patient's brain is completely immersed in throwing virtual snowballs at penguins in this icy world.
The pain receptors are essentially distracted.
Exactly. The brain doesn't register the agony because it's so focused on the game.
That is an incredibly accurate functional analogy. The learner here is performing rigorous, highly complex cognitive rehabilitation.
They are rewiring how they perceive sound.
Right. But because the delivery mechanism is an entertaining argument about coffee, The brain is distracted from the pain of the academic workload.
The effective filter never goes up because the learner doesn't even realize they're doing heavy lifting.
They just think they're listening to a fun conversation.
But, understanding the theory in a low-stress, VR-like environment is really only half the battle. Conceptually understanding that English uses Morse code rhythm does not physically change how a 30-year-old Indonesian speaker moves their jaw.
No, it doesn't.
If I listen to a podcast about coffee, my brain might get it, but my mouth is still trained to operate like a metronome.
Which brings us to the most physically demanding requirement of the entire English Spark framework.
Let's get into it.
The mandate for active neuromuscular repetition.
Okay.
The curriculum enforces strict listening focus cues, prompted by the phrase, listen carefully.
Yeah.
Followed by shadowing practice, prompted by the phrase, repeat after me.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I have to offer some genuine pushback here.
Go for it.
This methodology relies heavily on shadowing, literally repeating phrases out loud.
Yes.
But we are talking about an adult demographic, neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to easily form new neural connections. It basically drops off a cliff after age 25.
It slows down significantly, yes.
Yes. So can a 30-year-old actually rewire their facial muscles to hit a stress-timed beat? Or are they just going to end up sounding like an Indonesian speaker trying really hard to do an impression of an American?
Are they just training parrots, basically?
Exactly. If I'm just repeating phrases, am I actually learning the language, or am I just becoming a really good parrot?
This raises an important question. And honestly, the fear of producing parrots is the exact reason many modern linguists historically rejected audiolingual repetition.
Because it didn't work.
Right. If you just tell an adult to repeat after me, they will use their native phonetic filter to interpret the sound, and they will reproduce it using their native muscle habits.
They will just say the Indonesian version of the English words, just louder.
Precisely. Because their brain literally cannot process the nuance of the new rhythm.
It's blocking it out.
Exactly. And the English Spark architects know this. That is why the phrase listen carefully is explicitly mandated before the shadowing even occurs.
Okay, so it's not just filler dialogue.
Not at all. It is a neurological trigger. It's designed to bypass that 25-year-old neuroplasticity wall by engaging the reticular activating system.
The reticular activating system, or the RAS. Let's explain this for you listening, because this is wild.
It really is.
This is the network of neurons in the brainstem that acts as a bouncer for your brain.
The bouncer, yeah.
It filters out the billions of pieces of sensory data you are constantly bombarded with every second. And it decides what is actually important enough to pass up to your conscious awareness.
Everyone has experienced the RAS in action.
The red car example, right?
Exactly. You decide you want to buy a specific model of a red car. And suddenly, you see that exact red car on every single street corner.
It's like they multiplied overnight.
But the cars were always there. Your RAS was just previously filtering them out as irrelevant background noise. Once you programmed your brain to care about the red car, the RAS started letting that visual data through.
So how does that apply to an Indonesian speaker trying to hear an English schwa sound or a compressed syllable?
Well, during infancy, our brains are universally receptive to all phonetic sounds. We can hear everything.
Right.
But as we grow and specialize in our native tongue, the RAS begins to prune away the ability to hear sounds that don't exist in our daily environment.
Efficiency.
Yeah. An Indonesian speaker's brain literally filters out the rhythmic compressions of English, because for the last 30 years, those compressions have been totally irrelevant to their survival.
That is just wild. They are physically incapable of hearing the Morse code rhythm until someone explicitly programs their internal bouncer to let that auditory data in.
That's why the phrase, listen carefully to how I squish these two words together, is the programming code.
It turns on the auditory flashlight.
It tells the RAS, hey, this specific phonetic microinteraction is now vital for survival. Let it through.
It forces the educator to point out the subtle rhythmic difference before the mimicking begins.
Exactly. So when the learner finally does hear the prompt, repeat after me, they aren't just blindly parroting.
They are actively targeting a specific, newly revealed phonetic connection.
And this is what transitions the exercise from gross motor mimicry to fine motor neuromuscular training.
It's physical training.
It is. Your lips, tongue, jaw, and vocal cords have spent 3 decades moving in a highly ingrained pattern.
The metronome.
Right. To speak English with a natural rhythm, you have to force those muscles to fire differently. You have to learn how to hold tension in your jaw for a stressed syllable, and completely collapse your tongue for an unstressed schwa.
The source material also mandates that these scripts include short pauses written naturally into the dialogue. I assume this is the physical training ground for that muscle memory.
Yes. Those pauses, which are usually a 3-second beat of silence left for the listener, they are the crucial execution window.
It gives the adult brain the precise amount of time needed to process the newly filtered auditory input.
Send a novel electrical signal down to the facial muscles.
And execute the physical rhythm in real time, all before the conversation moves on.
It turns the listener from a passive consumer of a podcast into an active physical participant.
They are literally doing mouth push-ups.
And it is incredibly taxing. Shadowing effectively means you are fighting your own biology.
You are overriding decades of deep-seated physical habits, which highlights a glaring practical issue here.
Okay.
Doing mouth push-ups is exhausting. It is frustrating. You sound a little ridiculous when you are sitting alone in your car over-enunciating the word coffee to an imaginary friend on your stereo.
It can feel very silly, yes.
And the source material mandates these sessions last between 20 to 25 minutes.
That's a long time for intense focus.
Right. If an adult learner is stressed, tired from work, and biologically fighting their own jaw muscles, why wouldn't they just quit after 5 minutes? How does this framework prevent massive burnout?
The mechanism that prevents burnout is perhaps the most brilliant psychological trick in the entire blueprint.
I can't wait for this.
The framework utilizes what I call the invisible architecture of adult learning.
Invisible architecture.
Okay.
Because the architects of this curriculum created a complete paradox.
They did.
On one hand, the internal document dictates a highly detailed, extremely rigorous academic structure.
Yes, it demands a hook, a greeting, a core explanation, a deep dive, examples, practice, a recap, an assignment, and a call to action.
It is as rigid and comprehensive as any university syllabus.
It is a phenomenal traditional lesson plan.
BUT. And this is the massive guardrail we mentioned earlier. The source explicitly commands, quote, "Do not label sections explicitly. Everything must feel like a natural conversation."
End quote, yes.
The educators are forbidden from letting the learner know they are inside a syllabus.
Think about the psychology of formal education for a second.
Okay.
What happens to your body when a teacher stands at the front of a room, claps their hands, and announces, "Our class"? That concludes the theory portion. We're now moving on to the practical examination.
Oh man, your stomach drops, your posture stiffens, your brain immediately goes, "I'm about to be tested. If I fail, I am inadequate."
The cortisol spikes immediately.
And what happens when cortisol spikes?
The affective filter slams shut. The amygdala takes over, and the language acquisition center goes completely offline.
So what does this all mean? By forcing the educators to hide the architecture, the framework removes the triggers of formal education.
Exactly. The curriculum has the rigid backbone necessary to ensure comprehensive learning, but it is entirely cloaked in the casual, flowing dialogue of a podcast.
They are maintaining the illusion of the coffee shop chat from minute 1 to minute 25.
If the learner doesn't know they're transitioning into a practice section, they don't have time to tense up.
The host simply says, "Hey, try saying that with me," and seamlessly leads them into the neuromuscular shadowing.
The learner remains in a state of continuous conversational flow.
And as we established, that relaxed, low cognitive load state is the exact physiological requirement for the reticular activating system and the language centers to remain open and receptive to rhythm.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it speaks to the cutting edge of modern adult education, far beyond just language learning. The era of the stuffy, monotone, labeled lecture is dead.
Thank goodness.
The 20 to 30-year-old demographic does not have the patience for it, nor should they.
We are conditioned by high-quality media, by engaging narratives, by fluid content.
The best educational experiences today, whether you are learning English rhythm, corporate leadership strategies, or how to rebuild a car transmission, they feel like an engaging chat with a knowledgeable peer.
By utilizing light humor, which the source mandates, and maintaining a balanced active dialogue without long monologues, the curriculum honors the learner's time and intelligence.
It is a way to trick the adult brain into returning to that sponge-like state of childhood learning.
Because children don't learn their native language because someone labeled a drill for them.
No, they absorb it through constant exposure, high-context situations, and guided interaction disguised as play.
This framework just engineered a way to artificially recreate that environment for adults.
It is a masterful manipulation of both psychology and physiology.
It really is. So we have covered a massive amount of ground today in reverse engineering the English Spark framework.
We certainly have.
The ambition of this curriculum is staggering when you actually look at the mechanics of what it is asking educators to do.
It's not just a casual chat, even if it sounds like one.
Right. So to synthesize the core takeaways for anyone, for you listening, trying to master something as fluid and dynamic as the rhythm of a new language.
The first step is clear.
First, you have to completely abandon the rigid robotic textbook. It is a two-dimensional tool trying to teach a three-dimensional skill. It will only reinforce your native metronome.
Because textbooks can teach you the rules of syntax, sure, but only conversation can model the messy, essential rhythm of human connection.
Second, you cannot conquer a complex concept by staring at academic jargon.
It just raises the effective filter.
You have to anchor the difficult mechanics like contrastive stress or phonetic compression in incredibly familiar everyday routines.
You bypass your brain's threat detection system by burying the lesson in a relatable argument about morning coffee.
You keep the cognitive load low so the effective filter stays open.
Exactly.
Third, conceptual understanding is useless without physical execution.
The mouth push-ups.
Yes, you must actively engage in neuromuscular shadowing. But you can't just parrot sounds.
You have to use the listen carefully spotlight to program your reticular activating system.
To actually hear the new rhythmic beats, and then you have to put in the exhausting physical work of training your facial muscles to hit those beats during the pauses.
You have to transition from a passive consumer of information into an active physical participant.
And finally, the most effective learning happens within an invisible architecture.
A solid, rigorous structure that is perfectly disguised as a casual, friendly interaction.
Keeping your anxiety at zero and your engagement at maximum.
And you know, the implications of this blueprint matter profoundly to you, the listener, regardless of your current goals.
Yeah, how does this apply outside of language?
Well, whether you are actively using this exact methodology to rewire your jaw muscles and fix an Indonesian accent, or you are trying to acquire a completely unrelated professional or personal skill, the biological principles remain identical.
The brain works the way the brain works.
Right. Focusing on the practical rhythm, the physical execution, and the real-world context of a skill is exponentially more effective than memorizing its theoretical rules in a sterile environment.
You have to get off the sheet music and onto the dance floor.
Yes.
You have to feel the beat of whatever it is you are trying to master. And that leaves me with a final thought I want you, the listener, to mull over as you step back into your day.
Okay.
We so often think of our accents. And I mean that both literally in the phonetic sounds we produce, but also metaphorically in our personal rhythms, our daily habits.
Our default reactions to stress.
Exactly. Or our ways of communicating with our partners. We think of these things as permanently hardwired into our identity from birth.
We say things like, "That is just how I sound," or "That is just how I am wired."
But if this deep dive into neuromuscular training and the reticular activating system has shown us anything, it is that rhythm is not destiny.
No, it's not.
Rhythm is just a deeply ingrained physical habit. It is built entirely by mimicking the environment around us for decades.
So it can be rebuilt.
So if a literal physical accent can be fundamentally dismantled and changed just by actively choosing to shadow a different voice and practice a different pause.
No.
What other supposedly fixed traits about your personality, your capabilities, or your life could you completely transform simply by choosing a different voice to shadow? Think about that. Keep learning.